Most people think cheating begins with a kiss, a message, or a secret meeting. Psychology shows it usually begins much earlier, quietly, long before anyone crosses a physical line. By the time an affair happens, the emotional groundwork has often been laid for months or even years. By the end of this discussion, you'll understand how cheating often begins invisibly, why the brain moves towards betrayal before the body does, and how everyday emotional habits can slowly push someone away from their relationship without them even realizing it. Cheating rarely begins with attraction alone. It often begins with disconnection. When emotional needs go unmet, the brain starts searching for relief, validation, or novelty. This is not always a conscious choice. The mind is wired to seek safety, pleasure, and belonging, and when those needs feel threatened or ignored, attention naturally drifts elsewhere. In long-term relationships, familiarity can quietly dull emotional responsiveness. Conversations become practical instead of curious. Touch becomes routine instead of intentional. Appreciation is assumed instead of expressed. None of this feels dramatic, but the nervous system notices. When emotional stimulation decreases, the brain begins to crave contrast. This is where the first invisible shift happens. Someone starts feeling more alive outside the relationship than inside it. Not because their partner is bad, but because the emotional environment has become predictable. The brain is deeply sensitive to novelty. Dopamine responds to what is new, unexpected, and affirming. When novelty disappears at home, it becomes louder elsewhere. Think about how this shows up in real life. A harmless conversation at work starts feeling energizing. A friend listens in a way that feels refreshing. Someone laughs at jokes that go unnoticed at home. None of this feels like cheating yet, but emotionally, the brain is already learning where it feels seen. Psychology explains that emotional intimacy is the true foundation of attachment. When emotional closeness weakens, the bond doesn't disappear instantly, it thins. And in that thinning space, outside connections begin to feel heavier, warmer, more important than they should. Another early sign appears in attention patterns. Someone begins sharing thoughts, frustrations, or excitement with someone else before sharing them with their partner. This shift seems small, but it's critical. Emotional priority changes quietly. The brain learns who provides relief, understanding, or validation fastest. At this stage, many people still believe they're loyal. They haven't done anything wrong. But the brain doesn't divide loyalty into neat categories. It tracks emotional investment. Where attention goes, attachment follows. Here's an uncomfortable question worth reflecting on. Who is the first person you want to tell good news to? Who feels safest when you're stressed? The answers reveal more than people realize. Another psychological factor at play is avoidance of discomfort. Many people don't cheat because they want someone else. They cheat because they don't want to face difficult conversations. Addressing dissatisfaction requires vulnerability, conflict, and emotional risk. Avoidance feels easier in the short term. Instead of saying, "I feel lonely," someone distracts themselves. Instead of addressing resentment, they numb it with validation elsewhere. The brain rewards avoidance by reducing stress temporarily. Unfortunately, this relief teaches the mind to repeat the pattern. Over time, this avoidance rewires emotional habits. Rather than repairing intimacy, the brain learns to escape it. That's when emotional boundaries start dissolving. What once felt inappropriate now feels justified. The inner dialogue changes quietly. Thoughts like, "they understand me better," or "this feels harmless" begin to appear. The brain is excellent at rationalizing behavior that meets unmet needs. This is not about morality, it's about emotional regulation. Another surprising insight is that many affairs begin during personal vulnerability, not relationship failure. Stress, grief, identity shifts, or aging can destabilize the sense of self. When people feel uncertain about who they are, external validation becomes especially powerful. In these moments, attention from someone new doesn't just feel flattering, it feels grounding. It restores a sense of desirability, competence, or youth. The brain links that feeling to the person providing it, not realizing it's responding to internal insecurity. This explains why some people cheat even when they say they love their partner. Love and unmet emotional needs can coexist. The brain does not experience them as opposites. As emotional attachment shifts, secrecy often follows, not because someone intends to betray, but because they feel a subtle sense of guilt or confusion. They start editing stories, leaving out details, protecting the new emotional space from scrutiny. Secrecy is a psychological alarm bell. It signals that emotional boundaries have already been crossed internally. The behavior may still look innocent on the surface, but the mind knows something important is being protected. At this point, the brain begins creating mental comparisons. The partner feels demanding, the outside person feels easy. The partner represents responsibility, the outside connection represents escape. These comparisons are deeply unfair, but they feel real because they are emotionally charged. This is where cheating truly begins, not with touch, but with emotional reallocation. The brain has shifted its attachment system. Physical actions may follow, but they are not the starting point. Here's another reflection worth considering. When problems arise, does someone lean in or pull away? Withdrawal is often the earliest behavioral sign of an internal exit. Emotional distance grows before physical distance ever does. Interestingly, people who are most shocked by their own infidelity often ignored these early signs. They believed cheating was something they would never do, but self-image alone does not protect behavior. Emotional awareness does. Psychology shows that strong boundaries are not just rules, they are habits of honesty, curiosity, and emotional presence. When those habits weaken, temptation doesn't have to knock loudly, it simply walks in. The brain also plays a role through gradual desensitization. What once felt wrong starts feeling normal. Texting late at night becomes routine. Emotional reliance deepens. The nervous system adapts, and the internal warning signals quiet down. This is why many people say affairs feel unreal while they are happening. The brain is operating in a narrowed emotional state, prioritizing immediate relief over long-term consequences. Breaking this pattern requires awareness long before cheating occurs. It requires noticing emotional drift early and addressing it directly. That means having uncomfortable conversations instead of escaping them. It also means understanding that desire for novelty does not mean failure. It means the brain is responding to unmet stimulation. That stimulation can often be restored within the relationship if both people are willing to engage. Relationships don't fail because people stop loving. They often fail because people stop feeling emotionally alive together. When curiosity fades, connection weakens. When connection weakens, the brain looks elsewhere. Here's the surprising part. Cheating often has less to do with sex and more to do with emotional regulation. People seek affairs not to replace their partner, but to escape how they feel inside themselves. Understanding this doesn't excuse betrayal, but it does explain it. An explanation is the first step toward prevention. As you think about this, consider where emotional energy flows in your own life. What feels nourishing? What feels draining? Awareness of these patterns is protective, not accusatory. Healthy relationships require ongoing emotional maintenance, not perfection. Attention, appreciation, and openness are not optional extras. They are the glue that keeps attachment intact. When emotional needs are named early, they don't need to be met secretly later. When vulnerability is welcomed, avoidance loses its grip. Cheating rarely begins in a moment of passion. It begins in moments of silence, distance, and unmet emotional needs.
Long before an affair, there is usually an emotional story unfolding quietly. If this perspective shifted how you think about relationships, reflect on it. Share your thoughts, engage with the discussion, and stay curious about the emotional patterns that shape connection. Awareness is where real change begins.